New Irish accounts can enjoy a risk-free first bet up to €100. So if your first bet loses, we'll refund your stake with a free bet. Now that's giving you more. Bruce Betting. In-store, online, and now on your phone. T's and C's apply. Please gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
Now then, much to discuss. Andy Dunne here in studio. Thanks for coming in. Hello.
Hello, Joe.
Good man. And Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent in Japan. I presume Kobe. Rory, how you doing?
Hi, Joe. Yeah, Kobe.
So, in short, today, Scotland have beaten Samoa by 34 points to 0. We've had confirmation at this stage. Jack Conan is gone. Geordie Murphy has, I presume, arrived at this stage. And what was going to be an open Irish session tomorrow is now a closed Irish session tomorrow. Is that about the gist of today?
Yeah, that's the gist of it. I've covered about, 1,000 miles in trains. I was up in Tokyo at the Wales-Australia game, called down to the Russians who have stationed themselves at a closed holiday resort called Oisa on the coast outside Tokyo, and then came down to Kobe, got to Scotland-Samoa, which was a terrible match. And then, in between, picked up that bit of news that open session was cancelled, and unfortunately, any fans who wanted to go see Ireland, it was the only opportunity that they would see. It was supposed to be kind of community engagement event. Unfortunately, they couldn't get the support on the ground from the local committee. It's been cancelled. It's not a massive deal. I think it's when these things always become bigger when in the wake of a defeat. And Ireland put their masseur up today for interview, which was an interesting choice 2 days after the biggest defeat in their World Cup history.
To talk about recovery and massages and things like that?
I think it was one. Yeah, I think he's a long-standing member and very respected member of staff, Willie Bennett, really popular. And I'd say it was a really good idea that they had planned from a long time out, that if they beat Japan, this is going to be a weird week, a quiet week. It will get them through a day of media. They have to put everyone up. But I think maybe they should have pulled them and put someone who could be held to account for the performance. Might have been a better idea.
Held to account. Look at you. I mean, they're thrown to the lions, as Rory O'Connor. Held to account. Let's CJ Stander. You had Johnny Sexton yesterday, right?
Johnny was up, yeah. I was up in Tokyo at the Wales-Australia game, but Johnny was up. He said very little. He said that it might be a blessing in disguise, which is, the least convincing answer I've ever heard from Johnny Sexton.
Yeah.
God, I don't know what sort of blessing they're looking for, but no, they have. Look, those who've been up have had the front up, and CJ Sanders said it was the most disappointing, or one of the most disappointing moments of his Ireland career. All the things you'd expect them to say. No one's expecting a Heineken Mayer apology to the nation. We're not in that territory, but I just think you gotta front up a bit more. Joe Schmidt's up tomorrow, so we'll hear from him again.
Just before we talk about the game and bring Andy in, pool permutations, it's not overly convoluted, really. Ireland need 2 bonus points, guarantees progression, and then Japan against Scotland will determine whether Ireland go through first or second. That's about where we are.
Yep, that's correct. Samoa also in the hunt if they get 2 bonus point wins, unlikely as it is against Japan and Ireland. They're on 5 points along with Scotland, but their chances fairly faded tonight. So, Ireland's destiny remains in its own hands. They should get a bonus point against Russia. Russia aren't in the same league. I think it's a 52-point spread, whereas Japan was a 21-point spread, and the bookies fairly got that wrong. And then Samoa, on the back of I think a 4-day or 5-day turnaround from their previous game, will be struggling. So Ireland should be okay in both of those games, albeit it's getting bodies through really at this stage because they're kind of a bit of walking wounded.
So Andy, the worst defeat of Joe Schmidt's tenure and beyond on Saturday. How early on in the game did you start to think this isn't looking so good?
Not early. I thought we did an excellent first 30 minutes. And when we get carried away in the emotion of defeat and a worse defeat for Joe, and maybe our worst World Cup defeat in history, we can get a little emotionally carried away. But the first 30 minutes were pretty good, so I didn't get a sense that we were in trouble really probably until a little into the second half. There was an alarming 10 minutes before half time, and when you look back in hindsight, I think there was a little bit of a shift in momentum in that 10-minute period. They brought on Leach. He's talismanic for that Japanese team, and his first involvements were due to unforced errors from us, the line out going astray and overthrow. It brought a new guy onto the field who was looking to make an impact, and it gave him every opportunity to make an impact and seemed to lift the Japanese. So again, in hindsight, looking at it, that was probably a momentum shift of relatively sizable proportions after 30 minutes. But I didn't get a sense until probably into the second half that we were in trouble.
If we take the first 30 minutes for a moment, why not? Let's talk about some of the positives. What was good? What did you like? Certainly...
Sorry, the earphones keep falling out here.
You're okay. Certainly Jack Carty's boot was adventurous and causing a bit of havoc. There were 2 tries scored with penalty advantages. There were things happening. There were offloads. The team didn't look dead on their feet. So what? That was all good. Is that the kind of stuff that was jumping out at you?
Yeah, it was smart rugby against the side who were trying to move the ball in a very... Collectively, they're very efficient at moving the ball. They use the full width of the field. They have a very similar style to New Zealand and Argentina, actually, where they're using the full width of the field a lot. Their passing is of excellent quality, and they told us beforehand, they told everyone beforehand in the World Cup, they were going to try and outrun teams through fitness and in the humidity, and we knew that. And I think we played a certain way for 30 minutes that tried to disarm the strengths of the Japanese. We held the ball in the maul a bit longer. We kicked into space very well through Jack Carty, and we box kicked well. And I've been a huge critic of the box kick as a defensive exit strategy. I thought we've overused it, but we, for example, in the stats after the game, we actually kicked out of hand in the end quite a number less than what we normally average, and I think it was the game to kick out of hand, kick high balls to their back 3. So yeah, there was just really surprising to change tactics during the game, whether we chose to do it or not, or whether we panicked.
And what was that change? What was the difference?
Well, the difference, I mean, there was a passage of play probably 10 minutes into the second half where we hit a scrum, we hit Farrell up, who made ground. So it was real classic Joe ball, 1-out rugby. You know, you could do loads of things off a scrum, but we hit Farrell up and he made ground, and Conor Murray box kicked and they knocked on, and we got a scrum, and then we got a penalty, and we ended up in their 22. That's exactly the way we should have just kept going against Japan. It's a bit negative, it's not expressive, it's not creative, but it's going to get you a better result against that Japanese side. But for some inexplicable reason, we tried to almost take them on at their own game in the humidity, move the ball around, concede control, avoid using our maul, which was going well, and it brought them into the game. So there was a lack of clarity on the field about that. So yeah, I don't know whether that was in preparation. The players didn't have I've seen it happen. I've been a part of it on the field as a player, but to see it happen in the World Cup, and it's such an important moment, and given the patterns of play we've had that have been so predictable for so long, to abandon them when we least needed to abandon them was disappointing.
But were we not playing that different brand of rugby in the first 20 minutes as well, which was
not really. No, I don't think we were. I think what we were seeing was we were using the crossfield kick well, but we weren't. I mean, we'd 7 offloads to match the Japanese 7 offloads, but we don't do them as well. We haven't practiced it long enough periods in the lead up to the World Cup, and we tried. I mean, Earls was one of our best players, but he tried one while he was getting tackled and spilled it. Rory Best tried one while he was getting tackled and spilled it. We're not a team who's practiced it enough under pressure to execute it under pressure. So no, I think there were very smart, pragmatic little pieces of play from Carty, but generally we were sticking to plan for that first 30 minutes.
Roy, I mean, watching at home, even as Japan chased down the Irish lead, it started to feel inevitable that they would take the lead. I don't know what the atmosphere was like in the stadium sort of 10-15 minutes into that second half when they really had the game under control.
Yeah, like I never felt, while Ireland got control on the scoreboard, I never felt like they were in control of the game. I thought from the start of the game the energy levels were off where they were against Scotland. It brought me back to being in Cardiff 4 years ago when Ireland put all of their eggs into beating France at the World Cup and had this hugely emotional, intense performance that resulted in them getting out of the pool and winning the pool. And a week later, they just couldn't get to that pitch against a team who went wide and beat them outside. Now, there wasn't the same level of injuries in between and all those sort of excuses, but I felt like they could not get to the emotional pitch a week later against Japan, a game that was, in retrospect, and look, nobody called it, but was actually, if not as dangerous, more dangerous than Scotland. The humidity was much higher in Shizuoka than it was in Tokyo or in Yokohama, and I've never experienced a wall of noise like what greeted everything Japan did positively. And once things started to go against Ireland, and as I said, I didn't think they had a huge amount of control on the pitch, even though they had control on the scoreboard, because Matsushima, that ball knocked over his head. They were stretching Ireland in defence. They were having to scramble way more than they liked to. Once the penalties started to go against them, once the line-out started to melt down, they went away from their strengths. They started making on-the-fly decisions. They started trying things that they don't normally try. They stopped doing the things that they did well in the first 20 to 25 minutes. Like Jack Hardy didn't cross-kick after the one that came off on the edge of the 22 for Keith Earls, where they raced the length of the pitch and Rory Best threw the ball away. The scrum penalty, like the noise that greeted that scrum penalty after about 32, 33 minutes, which was kind of the moment where it felt like Japan were getting on top properly. I genuinely never, I've been to sporting events of all sorts of things, I've never heard anything like it. And I think it was an assault on the Irish senses. And I think if they were at the end of 2018, they would have handled it in the way that Wales handled things yesterday. But because we were at the end of 2019, when they were, as the coach said, a bit broken by the experience of losing to England and losing to Wales, they started to doubt themselves. They started to doubt their own decisions. And they didn't have Johnny Sexton. And while it's not on Jack Carty, it's on the other leaders in the team. But it's becoming increasingly apparent that the other leaders of the team look to the chief leader, and that's Johnny Sexton. And when he's not there, I know he didn't have a great Six Nations, but when things were going badly, they just needed him. They needed him to make the decisions because they weren't making the decisions. And when Peter O'Mahony, the other vice-captains, hauled shore before the 50th minute mark, when Rory Best, who for some reason went 80 minutes, there may be injuries, but we don't hear about these things, went 80 minutes a week ago, and then suddenly he's been asked at 37 to patch up. He's just not able to do it. Tyke Furlong on line, well under par. Cian Healy, players are getting knocked back, and the bench come on, and things are going against them. Discipline is gone wrong. It just was a succession of error compounding error, like in Twickenham. And while it wasn't as spectacular in terms of the scoreboard, it was almost inevitable. And then once they started chasing, they just didn't have the game to chase. As we've seen throughout the Joe Schmidt era, once they get behind in games, it's harder and harder for them to chase. And Carberry's not fit. Carberry came on, he admitted it afterwards, he's not fit, he wasn't able to do it, he didn't give a pass that he should have given. So there was a number of factors that came into it, and I think it has to be said that Japan played so far above the level that we've ever seen from them before for 80 minutes, which no one saw coming, and it was a performance that would have beaten almost any other team in the world as well. But we thought Ireland were part of that club of countries that would be able to rise above anyone at the end of 2018. They've come so far back to the pack that someone like Japan, when they hit that level, can pick them off, and deservedly so. They deserved it.
Hindsight points are always a bit unfair on the coaching staff, but there is one, since you brought up Sexton, that is worth just discussing or throwing around. Brian O'Driscoll was on here yesterday. He sort of made the point that he hoped that we weren't kind of cutting off our nose to spite our face with regard to you have to take a full part in training Monday, Tuesday if you want to play the game, because exceptions can be made, and they probably should be made at times, for Johnny Sexton in the World Cup, especially for a game like this, where if you get over the line, the rest of the pool is relatively smooth sailing and there's time to rest and recuperate. So Sexton speaking yesterday, he was asked specifically, were you fit? You know, it's this very simple question and we can't seem to get a clear answer. And he said, well, I couldn't fully train Monday, Tuesday. So the decision was made that I would sit this one out. But that implies if he was given it a bit later in the week, he could have played. Now, nobody was banging the table about this Thursday, Friday, so it is a hindsight argument, but it's not one which reflects well, certainly, on the decision made.
You're right. I think everyone thought that the 1 to 9 could get the job done. I think Joe Schmidt thought he could get the job done, and Joe Schmidt felt that the long game was give Johnny Sexton that weekend off, get through the game, and the reward will come in the quarter-final. And they probably still will get to a quarter-final, and maybe not putting Johnny out there and tearing his quad or whatever injury it is. I've lost track of the different explanations we've been given. And the thing is, we just can't take anything they say about injuries at face value anymore. So when Joe Schmidt said on Thursday that Johnny could have played, I just don't know what that means anymore. And then when Johnny says I could have played, if he could have played and he was fit to play, then play him. He's the best player in the team. But they obviously felt there was a risk, because otherwise they wouldn't have started Jack Hardy, the third choice out half, and put Joey Carberry, the second choice out half, on the bench, even though he admitted afterwards he's not fit. He hasn't played in so long. So the smoke and mirrors comes back and gets them in the end. If they give, it's like when Joe Schmidt told us Japan were brilliant. He tells us every team are brilliant. So we stopped listening after a while. These are the things that we can't. We don't know what to say of Johnny Sexton's fitness is. Only Johnny Sexton and the management and the medical team do. But what they told us was he was fit enough to train on Thursday. And if so, I would say pick him, because Joe Schmidt told us Japan were as good as they are. If they are, they need a Johnny out there, and the big risk is he's probably going to play against Russia this weekend. They might need him against Samoa next weekend.
I was just going to say that.
now. Where do we go from there? Do we play Johnny Sexton 5 games in a row if Ireland are going to win a World Cup?
No, you can't.
Obviously, that's a conversation we're well beyond this stage. But
in many ways, the worst
everywhere.
In many ways, the worst break for this team was Carberry's injury. When you look at the situation now, 50 minutes of rugby since May, and that's put them in a tricky spot. But Andy, it does now mean wiggle room is at a complete premium. It's non-existent. So Sexton, it seems, is going to play against Russia. Then you presume he has to play against Samoa, and then he's into a quarter-final 3 games in a row. And given his profile at the moment, you have to wonder 3 games in a row. He's most certainly going to be nowhere near 100% come the third game. So that situation now has become very tricky for them to handle. Be a brave decision not to play him against Russia.
Yeah, it's a bit like a kid that panics in a classroom. The teacher ends up asking simple questions and the kid gets it wrong. Johnny, to me, shouldn't play against Russia. They're bang average. We should beat them no matter what. Carty is still a good player. Carberry's still a good player. Give him a break. We don't need to be reactive and play him and risk him. We ought to beat Russia, honestly, with our hands tied behind our back. And I think they need to be brave about it. But it looks a little bit like the wall's closing in. It is a high pressure environment, but everything that Rory's mentioned, things such as, was Willie Bennett the right guy to come out and talk 2 days after our biggest ever World Cup defeat, is, it's if they can get it slightly wrong at the moment, they're getting it slightly wrong, and that's not a nice place to be for anyone, for the coaching staff, for the players. It'd be nice if they could all take a deep breath, but that's not how life works. There's a World Cup at stake, and there's a 4-day turnaround.
But with or without Johnny Sexton, Ireland beat Russia. I appreciate this is going to be played back to me in 6 days' time.
Yes.
But that is the point you're making here, and they need
without a doubt.
They need to step back and actually just calm this down.
Take a few big deep breaths. Where really disappointing to see so many senior players on the field not taking responsibility in the middle of the match to change it. There's way too much experience out there, even though this whole narrative that Japan had prepared for a year. We prepared for a year for that Japanese game. Joe Schmidt, if we've all heard it 1,000 times, we've heard it more. He's meticulous in every part of his preparation. There is absolutely no way Joe Schmidt got hijacked tactically and just suddenly arrived last Monday and said, right, we've got Japan this week, lads, what do we do? Yeah. So whether Joe got it wrong over the course of the year, and there's an argument to say that based on our form and how we persisted with a style that everyone could pick, and now we can't change styles that quickly, and when we do try and change style, we panic. But there's the other argument, which is, you look at the All Blacks, won the first World Cup in '87. From then '91, they were really outscaled by a brilliant Australian side with Campese and Horan in Lansdowne Road. In '95, they got done over in the World Cup final, the famous game in the final where 5 or 6 of them had food poisoning. There was an excuse. There was 99 hijacked by the French, one of the great French flair performances. 03, Australia did a job on them. 07, France did another job on them. So this is a country where rugby is a religion, and you talk about a national crisis. What they did differently after 2007 was they looked at the capacity for their players to think clearly under pressure. And they brought in this skilled specialist, Gilbert Inoka, and he fundamentally changed how they operate, and they place huge value in that. And there was a recent interview with Albie Mathewson, and he had spoken about Johnny Sexton's body language, and he spoke about how the All Blacks place such emphasis on value, on thinking clearly, and literally having, keywords that is relevant to a given individual, that takes them out of the noise of the stadium, that takes them away from the humidity, that takes them away from anything. I think he referenced something like Kieran Reid going down to tie a shoelace, and it's literally a cue for him to step away from the emotion and go, what's happening right here, right now on the field? Mm-hmm. And our senior players didn't do that on Saturday, and we certainly haven't. I don't think we've a coach who enables players to do that all that much, because he has been so prescriptive and meticulous about how we play and how procedural it is to play under him. So those are the things, to me, when you sit back and look at the Japanese performance, you say, right, we're now in that All Blacks mould where 4 World Cups in a row we've completely imploded for one reason or another, and at no stage are we demonstrating a capacity to think clearly under pressure, to adapt, to bring variation into our game, and our skill levels aren't there either. So there's a real change that's required that's maybe bigger than the Japanese game.
Well, that's bigger than the short term. A few specifics from the Japan game, and Roy, I'll bring you in on these points as well. So the way Japan moved the ball around was a joy to watch. And you're looking at their passing, and I was saying it yesterday to Brian Driscoll and Malcolm O'Kelly, they look like they're more skilled than us. And the lads are saying they did yesterday, but they don't. We're just...
They do.
They do, yeah. Okay, well, it looked
I don't buy into that. We don't practice skills enough. One of the things that happened around that introduction of Gilbert Inoka into the All Blacks squad, and he seemed to be pervasive in all the positive change that happened, was the acknowledgement of Graham Henry to say, in the earlier parts of my career, the biggest mistake I made was I deemed myself important enough to know exactly what's going to happen at every facet of play in every international. And he since laughs about that and says, who did I think I was? How can I predict the unpredictable and the volatile every single week? Yeah. There's so much ambiguity in every international, in every rugby game.
Too many variables. But
so what they did was they changed the All Blacks changed how they train in every single pitch session, and they dedicated 12 to 20 minutes at the start of a session purely to skills development for an individual. Then they ran some team plays, and then they did their skills again at the end. I think 12 to 14 minutes. So when you add it up, you had about 30 to 32 minutes on skills in every pitch session. And on the back of that, you had the likes of Carter and McCall who'd stay out and do extras, which meant everyone else did extras, which meant every time they trained, they developed their skill level. Now, Graham Henry went over, was a consultant with Argentina, who did the exact same in 2015, and then went out and ripped us to shreds. Whether we lost guys to injury or not, they ripped us to shreds and they outskilled us.
So where's the Irish skill level?
It's poor compared to that Argentinian level was in the last World Cup, and we're not able to execute across the line compared to Japan. Okay.
Where I was going was to the Irish defence. So Japan have thrown the ball around. It's beautiful looking.
Yeah.
And yet the Irish defence seem to be standing off them and getting sucked in narrow as well. And so I'm wondering if Japan were to play, for instance, England in the morning, or Wales, who sometimes rush up when they're in the mood, would Japan still be able to throw the ball around? I'm asking the questions about Ireland's defence here.
Yeah. I think Japan would be able to throw the ball around, yeah. I think in Jamie Joseph and Tony Brown, they've 2 Kiwis again, who are very... the irony is Joe Schmidt is a Kiwi and doesn't seem to have this style ingrained in what he wants to do, certainly with Ireland. But in Jamie Joseph and Tony Brown, they've 2 guys who would have done it with Otago Highlanders, and again... would have worked off the edict that was coming from a national level down, and you build up your skills in a homogenised environment, and then you do it under pressure. So I think they've done it with Japan. So
Ireland got off the line against Scotland.
Yeah.
Finn Russell, another skillful player.
Yeah.
What was going on Saturday in that department? Like, where was this pressure? Where was using defence as an attack? Because actually Ireland just looked very vulnerable every time Japan had the ball.
Yeah.
Complete opposite to Scotland.
We didn't. We lost the penalty count. So I think we got scared about being competitive at the ruck because we either lost discipline or Angus Gardner was having what I think the Irish management are concerned was a little one-sided go on the Irish side against in the ruck.
Well, not to make excuses, Owen Doyle, writing today in the Irish Times, says Japan persistently put Irish players, or put players rather, their own players past the breakdown, obstructing, holding on to, taking out Irish players. This gave them a lot of forward momentum. I lost count of the number of times that the Irish poacher was taken out illegally.
Yeah.
But look, that's going to happen in games, you have to react.
You're damn right. So in a World Cup, we've got to react. If you're asking, why didn't we stop Japan playing that skill level? I think that's a component part. But I also think there was a duty upon us in this game to play the type of game that I've complained about before that bores us to death. Yeah. You stick it up your jumper, you maul more, you put high balls up on their back three who look very vulnerable actually. I mean they're brilliant winger, what's his name? I can't remember his name, sorry. But he caught it and he two brilliant sidesteps.
Oh yeah, brilliant.
And a great breakout. But actually when the ball was in the air, he knocked on a couple, so did their fullback. We should have stuck it up the jumper, we should have mauled, we should have slowed it right down, and we've done that inordinately in the last year and chose not to do it against Japan.
The irony here is that the game you have been railing against in some respects for the last however many years would have been the right game to play at the weekend.
Horses for courses. Like you can't, if we were going to break out and change and surprise ourselves, you want it to happen maybe against South Africa in the quarters.
Okay. Rory, do you want to come in and all that? The Irish defence for starters?
Well, just on the kind of breaking away from the traditional Joe Schmidt game plan, and it was a really un-Joe Schmidt week last week. I mean, we started by talking about South Africa after the win over Scotland. He had a go at Gardner on the Thursday at the team announcement, which was a very unwise thing to do ahead of a game against the host of the World Cup, where he was, Gardner would be known as a bit of a homer, I think, amongst in rugby circles. And then I think it was an element of, this is Tony Brown, the highest rated New Zealand coach. The guy, he's basically like Joe Schmidt was 10 years ago. He's the up and comer. And I think Joe wanted to beat him at his own game a bit. And I think there's a bit of that in what he was trying to do. And I think he wanted it to go and show that he could still, this is the coach that arrived at Leinster and wanted to make them the best passing team in Europe. And his team was outpassed and outrucked. And what does Joe Schmidt define as Joe Schmidt's team is defined by their ruck. The defence was, I think, an energy problem. I think it was due to the fact it was a 6-day turnaround, and that what I said earlier about the fact that they had they put so much into that Scotland game, that so much of the prep and so much of the focus pre-World Cup had been on. Rory Best used the phrase, we want to explode into the World Cup against Scotland, and I do think that they have a problem backing up performance like that. They didn't in 18, they do now. But I think the game plan part, getting sucked into throwing offloads when they haven't thrown offloads for, at that rate for so long, going away from box kicking, not exploiting the clear height advantage that they had over the Japanese back three, who had struggled so badly against Russia. I think Joe Schmidt, there was a bit of, for a guy who talks about being humble a lot, there was a little bit of ego at play.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard that point before. What about when Ireland had the ball and they did try, they did need points and they did need to break them down? I mean, the results weren't good. I'll play a very short clip, Rory, and then you can pick up in the back of it and tell us how it felt in the stadium. Malcolm O'Kelly was in yesterday and he came in, he just said, I've been watching Wales this morning, and even if they're losing collisions, even if they're losing the fight up front, they still have a bit of something about them. They'll throw a pass, they'll try something. He said, this Ireland team now is just too predictable. And Brian O'Driscoll picked up that point.
I think there is no flair. I think a lot of what Wales do and what they do really effectively is, they play heads-up rugby. They are given the go-ahead by Warren Gatland and by their coaching team to look and be the rugby players that they are. They've been picked internationally because that's what they're capable of doing. And I think that our structures are starting to inhibit us a little bit. We've got the players and the individuals to be able to break games. But the likes of Gary Ringrose has just not had any opportunity because he's not getting into the spaces where he'll cause most damage. How often do we see him on an outside break out in the 15-metre channels? Hardly ever. We're looking at our centres carrying so much ball forward to get into a particular system. I think we've got to have an ability to have a proper cut off. Simplicity of just throwing a flat one and letting him take an arc on the outside. I think those small, and then play off him. Run lines of support. I just think it's all just a little bit too contrived. We've got to try and take a few more risks, throw a few more offloads, and change the point of contact, and not have to work 15, 20 phases to try and earn a score, because it's tiring. Taking 15 phases, and we looked definitely like the more tired team yesterday. That's
Brian O'Driscoll reading from the Gospel of Andy Dunne, which can be bought in all good bookshops. So, I mean, I'm just a bit confused though here. So, did we throw offloads or did we not? Because where are we? Did we lose because we did or we didn't?
Can I clarify?
Yes.
From the Gospel.
Well, you're the God. I mean, I don't know if you can come down from heaven and speak, but go on.
I'll grant you 5 more minutes.
Okay.
We did. I think if we look at a pattern in our play over the last few years, we had become quite risk averse, and it worked in parts in 2018. Everybody went away and looked at us because we won a Grand Slam, a tour in Australia, and beat the All Blacks, and everyone said this is what Ireland currently do. We stayed with that plan, which I think is fine, because nobody knew until halfway through the England game in 2019 in the Six Nations, I think we're getting found out here. Yeah. And at what point do you abandon ship and say, right, everything we did last year is being found out? There's a certain amount of time, a lead time, you have to look and see, okay, is this working? It's suddenly not working. Then do we change? But we've got caught between two stools, and we go out with a kind of a return to form against Scotland, playing that way, which is the discernible way we now play for the last 2 years, that has brought us success. And we physically dominated Scotland, and we dominated the breakdown, and our set piece was excellent, and we looked really, really efficient.
Yeah.
Where we did go in against Japan was we got completely rudderless. We fell in between two stools. We started playing an offload game. We went away from the game that has brought us success. And my criticism over the last year was, at a certain point in a World Cup, that really physically domineering game can't win you and get you through every match. But Japan was not the game. It was absolutely not the game to abandon it. The South African game or the New Zealand game, perhaps. But Japan were playing this wildly entertaining, skillful end-to-end game in humidity that they've trained for long periods, and we kind of did a bad imitation of it for 20-30 minutes.
Okay, so it was a 20-30 minute period.
Yeah.
I've seen a few people make the point, Rory, that Ireland lost the collisions as well. So that's not down to size, really. Is that because Ireland at times are so predictable that Japanese defence can look at what Ireland are doing and they seem to throw themselves into the Irish ball carrier with absolute certainty?
Yeah, Ireland set themselves quite narrow, and I do think there's while they're smaller men, there's a lot of power athletes in that Japanese team. There's a lot of Tongans, there's a lot of South Africans, and they won they did win the collisions. It helped that they were winning the ruck battles, so they were slowing Ireland's ball down and then launching themselves from a good start. Whereas Ireland's defence, Japan were cleaning the ruck really, really deep. Joe was really, really annoyed about that it wasn't getting pulled. So the defensive line was having to go backwards before it came forwards, which was hindering the line speed aggression. So I think that is the case. But I mean, to go back to, I listened to Brian and Mal on the train down, and I didn't compute to what I saw. But I mean, if you look at Ringrose in particular, who was mentioned there, he ran the ball 6 times. He beat 7 defenders, made 4 clean breaks, and ran for 63 meters. I mean, that's it. Like, they got him into loads of space. They just didn't take the points when they were on, and they had chances to arrest the slide and to stop the Japanese momentum. And I think the one moment that I would keep going back to is the underthrow rather than the overthrow at the line out, because Ireland draw so much from their line out. They lost, I think, 3, certainly 2, and the one, I think it was about 45 to 50 minutes in, where Luke Thompson got up ahead of Ian Henderson.
Yeah.
And there's no way that ball should have ever been thrown that low. And that was the moment that Ireland get the score that silences. I don't know if you could ever silence that crowd, but it would have just taken the energy out of the stadium. it would have, like, what Wales did was they kept building the score, and even when when Australia came back at them, they found something within them. And Wales are now looking like what Ireland looked like at the end of 2018. They just look like a team who knows how to win. And Ireland have just gone so far away from that. It's a bit scary, because Wales are playing against, Wales did it against Australia, a contender for this trophy, whereas Ireland, with all due respect to a Japanese team that played really well, were playing against still a tier 2 team, and couldn't find it within themselves to arrest the flow of the game, to take the momentum back into their own favour, and that's a real concern.
A few quick ones, because I know it's nearly 2 a.m. where you are, so we'll let you go. In no particular order, or whatever way you want to come at them. The line-out situation, how much longer can that continue? The Robbie Henshaw situation, I mean, how many games can a player be unavailable before he hasn't been available for the World Cup? And then thirdly, there's only one specialist number 8 now. So these are some of the things Joe Schmidt has to wrestle with.
The line out, I think we've hitched ourselves to the Rory Bestey and Henderson wagon, and it's too late to change. I mean, I think the time to move on from Rory Best was after the 2018 tour of Australia. That was the chance. They went to Australia, they won a series without him. Peter O'Mahony captained the team. If that was the time where they should have said thank you and good luck and moved on, but they didn't. He's the captain, he has to start. Henderson and Ryan, like, they were brilliant against Scotland. They looked low on energy, but they can get, like, if you think that they're playing Russia and Samoa, who they should be, and then flow into a quarter-final, I don't think all hope is lost. I think this team can still produce something at this World Cup, and those two players will be central to that. So maybe it's handing more responsibility to Ryan, but at this stage you just got to fix what you have. It was only, like, they won the first 7 before things started to go wrong, and by the time we get to a quarter-final, it should be less humid. It's in the northern part of the country as well, which is less oppressive than it is here.
Henshaw.
What was the middle one? Henshaw, I don't think we'll see him this week. I think we might see him against Samoa. I think they're keeping him for a quarter-final. I think if Will Addison hadn't got injured, we might have seen him sooner. They're carrying a lot of players who are not able to, Chris Farrell is out this week. Bundy missed last week. There's a lot of players not able to train, which is not ideal. But yeah, the word is we're not going to see him this week. And then
the number 8,
yeah, that's like, Jack Conan's a massive loss. Jordy Murphy can play there and can play there quite well, although it hasn't gone well for him the last couple of times. But he did win a European Cup playing in the number 8 jersey for Leinster in 2018. So he can do it if you pick the right players around them. You kind of, you just change the way you play. He's probably more like a Jamie Heaslip style number 8 than a Jack Conan number 8. But Jack's gone. I think that is a big loss. I think they were moving towards having him in the team towards the quarter-final stage, and he was definitely going to start last week before he got injured in training. So that's a massive blow. And there's a lot on CJ Stander's shoulders now, and he's not playing. He was good against, in fairness, he was man of the match against Scotland. He wasn't great last Saturday, but again, if they can pick things up, if they can get this 10 points, I still think they'll produce something in a quarter-final. It might not be enough to win. I don't know if they're good enough to beat either of those teams anymore, but I think they'll perform.
Okay. Thank you very much for staying up late. We appreciate it. We'll be reading your work in the Irish Independent tomorrow. Thanks, Rory.
Thanks, lads.
Cheers. Andy, before I let you go, you sum up where we are then. So you don't want to see Sexton play against Russia. Is it still eminently possible that they'll produce something in a quarter-final, which may be a very, very efficient, energetic version of 2018 rugby, which will still cause any team problems when done to the best of all their abilities?
Yeah, I think
that's a possibility.
I think it's absolutely a possibility. I don't read the Financial Times, but I'd love to say I do and sound lofty. But I got an article sent to me today by one of their sports writers, where he's a columnist, and it was called The Death of the Maverick. And it was about Mesut Ozil, who was taken off after 45 minutes in the Carabao Cup the other night. And effectively he was saying sports science and data now can basically weeds out the Maverick, because your contributions to play are not what another automaton can do in every situation, but the automaton can't do the skillful flair thing that Brian O'Driscoll is talking about. So I think if you're summing up where we are, we can play the tight game really well, or we certainly did in 2018. We can go back to that and we can shake a team to its core, whether it's New Zealand or South Africa. But I don't think that style is good enough to go win a World Cup on its own. And then in terms of being on the other side where Brian is, with the flair and the Maverick and the exclusion of a number of players who could be under that bracket, we can't really do that bit either. So I think we need to double down on Joe Ball and go for it and try and really, really shake New Zealand or South Africa in that quarter-final, which we're very capable of doing.
Death of a Maverick could be the name of your upcoming autobiography, I feel.
Well, I'd be robbing it from the guy in the Financial Times, but...
Yeah. So, well, I guess we'll see what team they play against Russia and go from there.
Yeah, I hope they don't play Johnny. That'll be my hope. They don't need to whatsoever. But it's a bit reactionary, and Russia are a poor international rugby side, and we don't need Johnny with a question mark over his fitness to go out there. And I mean, as I said, 20 minutes ago, when you see a kid, I remember a kid under pressure in the classroom answering the most basic questions wrong because there's huge pressure, and it's not their level of intelligence.
Yeah,
we are just kind of doing one after another now that just looks like the wrong call.
Do you know, it's an observation from a couple of thousand miles away through a television, but Joe Schmidt throughout that game is very, agitated, and just the pressure was on.
Yeah,
I'm sure over there it's massive now, and I'm sure that camp at the moment is not panicked, but confidence must be badly bruised, to say the least.
It's a tough place, and we can only speculate as well, and we know, I think Joe had to go home to New Zealand, and there was a family bereavement.
Sure,
and,
yeah.
these things are all coming at the wrong time, and there's pressure on people. People are under pressure on their livelihoods, under huge scrutiny, and we're currently not dealing with it very well, and we don't want to celebrate that in any way, but we need to reverse out of it as fast as we can. And I know modern day kind of sporting critiques are not about softness either, but maybe this crew just needs a little bit of a break, and maybe they can turn around still and shake the Kiwis or the Springboks to their core by going back to what was good in 2018. Whether that's good enough to go win a World Cup or be consistently good for long periods, we don't know. Sure. But on its day, it can be good enough.
Andy Dunne, thanks very much.
Cheers.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.